Happy 70th NCPA. In honor of this momentous celebration, we are looking back over time to highlight the development, growth, and achievements of NCPA with people and photos. Some of our members offer us congratulations.
Happy birthday to NCPA on its 70th.
This is an incredible organization, and it's a privilege to celebrate 70 years of existence and service to psychologists and the citizens of North Carolina.
Happy birthday, NCPA.
I'm just so happy to be able to say happy anniversary today to us, to all of you.
Happy 70th birthday.
Happy birthday, NCPA. I was 4 years old when NCPA was founded. Now we've both aged, and I think NCPA has aged a little more gracefully with a lot more flexibility than I have.
And I just want to wish NCPA a happy 70th birthday. It's an amazing organization with a long history of service, and we're looking forward to many years to come.
I am happy to shout out happy birthday to NCPA and to say thank you to the staff and the members who've worked so hard over these 70 years.
My professional home is our association, NCPA. So delighted to be part of the 70th anniversary of this unbelievable home to so many of us. Congratulations to NCPA and congratulations to us.
NCPA is now a strong, vibrant organization, but developed from grassroots efforts of dedicated psychologists. Let's rewind 7 decades back to the beginning. In the 1940s, the world was changing, and psychology was changing. There was the Mental Health Act that was signed into law by President Harry Truman in 1946, and the development of new organizations. But one of the more significant events impacting psychology was the ending of World War II. There were many good things about the ending of the war, naturally, but also many challenges. There was a sudden surge in the need for psychological science and intervention. In North Carolina, at an Academy of Science meeting held at Davidson College, a small group of psychologists met at a business meeting and established NCPA, with dues starting at $1. Those who met to form NCPA at that time were primarily academic psychologists doing research and helping to build more educational programs in the state. Initial notes of early meetings were often handwritten, but the organization was developing and brave leaders came forward. The 1950s ushered in a new era for Americans. Social changes were occurring, like the Supreme Court decision to strike down the separate but equal doctrine. This was significant for the American society as a whole, but also marked the first time that psychological research was cited in a Supreme Court decision. Most of psychology, however, was focused on the seriously mentally ill. We were fortunately no longer drilling into the skulls of mental patients to release evil spirits, as had been the practice in previous centuries. But most insane asylums, or colonies for the feeble-minded, as they were known then, were primarily for custodial care, and conditions of most hospitals were woefully inadequate. But there were also innovative treatments being explored, like lowering an agitated patient into warm water to help calm them. But it was the advancement of science that really shifted the approach to mental health significantly, in understanding and in treatment. Medications began to be developed, allowing many patients to be released from hospitals, ready or not. Mental hygiene clinics were built and began to hire psychologists. Psychology began attending to public issues, with one local newspaper running an article with Rorschach blots interpretations, photos of an IQ test administration, and intelligence classifications. Featured articles that might now be considered unethical. Early leaders of NCPA, like Key Barkley, our third NCPA president in 1950, and Dorothy Adkins, the first female NCPA president in 1951, fought to organize psychologists in North Carolina. The movement to obtain licensure for psychologists became one of the primary goals. Committees were forming. NCPA business was conducted primarily by mail, whether this was for the first APA rep asking for feedback from members, or a dues notice, or a letter asking for approval of new members. The early newsletter, called the Bulletin, summarized some news and listed all members by name, all typed, of course. The 1960s brought forth many changes all over America. The South, including North Carolina, was also changing. NCPA meetings continued, with more committees being added. Communications with members continued, with news for and about members. NCPA began being more organized in their budgeting. Research, CE meetings, and gathering of psychologist members continued, whether the topic was ESP or children.
My first involvement with NCPA was when I was asked to make a presentation at one of its annual meetings in Pinehurst, North Carolina in the late 1960s. At that time, I talked about some of the research I was doing with young children at Duke.
There was still a fair number of psychologists working in academia, especially given the increasing number of educational paths being offered in psychology around the state. The North Carolina General Assembly passed the Community Mental Health Centers Act in the 60s, which resulted in more sheltered workshops and halfway houses. And so other psychologist jobs were opening up in community clinics. Advocacy of all sorts became popular in the 1960s, and NCPA also began to be more active in advocating as well, such as when NCPA lobbied to stop the proposed closing of the Wright School, a residential program for youth, or when NCPA formally spoke out against the speaker's ban law, which stated that no speaker could be invited to a college campus unless cleared by a committee which certified that the speaker was not of communist persuasion. NCPA also went on record in support of civil rights. Desegregation of the state institutions began, such as at Cherry Hospital, which had been the institution for only African American patients prior to 1965. Work on the licensing bill continued to be another significant item of business for NCPA, as seen by this member survey. There were multiple sources of resistance, including the medical society, psychiatrists, and even psychologists themselves. Senator Jesse Helms even reportedly requested the names of all NCPA members at that time, in an apparent belief that the association was up to no good. The bill was opposed several times. There was much internal and external tension, and even resignation of chairpeople over this issue. Dr. Harold Corder, president of NCPA in 1966, urged psychologists to get off your butts and fight for this. Finally, in July of 1967, the licensing law for practicing psychologists took effect and began a path for professionalization in organized psychology. This was a significant accomplishment, given there were no lobbyists, no staff, and much opposition, and took almost 20 years to achieve. The first licensing board was then formed, with Mary Clark presiding and receiving license number 1. The decade of the 1970s brought further development. For NCPA, activity slowed for a bit after the licensure law was established. Membership files became a bit outdated, annual meeting attendance decreased for a period of time, but then new leaders and goals emerged.
I learned that interest and participation at the local level makes a big difference. It's huge. So I made this lesson a piece of NCPA committee work as we assigned 18 chairpersons. So our 1974-75 NCPA leadership took an important step to take NCPA in a more democratic and inclusive direction.
The newsletter numbering was begun again in 1976, Volume 1, Number 1. And the article suggests that a growing number of practicing psychologists were interested in coming together to discuss insurance reimbursement, freedom of choice legislation, hospital staff privileges, a member directory. Dues went up to $15 per year. NCPA was maturing and aiming to keep up with the modern times.
I first became involved in NCPA. I believe my first meeting was in 1979. It was a coastal meeting, Wrightsville, Wilmington, something like that. It was a wonderful induction into the world of NCPA at that first meeting. I remember the excitement, the new ideas, and at one point during the business meeting, Brian asked for volunteers to be involved with a committee to explore the novel idea of getting a computer for NCPA. This was 1979 and personal computers were just becoming available, and I remember I sheepishly raised my hand.
The 1980s brought forward more firsts in the U.S. and firsts also for NCPA. Here's president of NCPA in 1981 to describe a few of them.
We established an advocacy structure for professional psychology in North Carolina, and we then moved it to APA, and it became what is now known or was known as the APA Practice Directorate. And in the space of a very short period of time, we expanded. We provided the greatest expansion in psychological services in history. And it was all came out of the research triangle. It was all pilot tested and planned right there. And that's what your ancestors did way back then. And we hired an executive director by the name of Sally Cameron. I interviewed her in my office on Easttown on a very wintry December day. And I knew she was going to be very, very good executive director for us. I hoped she'd stay a long time, but I never dreamed that over the next 4 decades, I would age like this and Sally would not age a day.
Yeah, my first meeting was before Sally was even hired, and when Sally was hired in 1981, it was a game changer. When I would go to Washington and meet colleagues from other state organizations, the common saying that I always heard is that, oh, we really wish we had a Sally Cameron.
There is unanimous consensus that one of the most significant events for NCPA in the 80s was the hiring of Sally Cameron. When Sally started, she was given only a shoebox of outdated member information.
It all started in the basement of Sally Cameron's house.
Eventually, there was money to move to an office with a meeting room. With Sally on board, the list of accomplishments grew, and activism was strengthened. NCPA explored identity and goals and funding. Committee functioning became more solid, with each committee being asked to develop goals, report to the board of directors, and direct their activities more independently. Many volunteers put in hundreds and hundreds of hours, not to mention dollars. Slowly but steadily, NCPA grew into a thriving organization, which became more proactive and effective rather than simply reactive. More psychologists began to go into private practice.
So back in the 80s, when I was on and then later chaired the insurance committee, there were significant turf issues, and there were many things psychologists could not do unless we were employed by or had signed off on by psychiatrists. And there was, fair to say, a great deal of tension between the North Carolina Psychological Association and the psychiatrists in the North Carolina Psychiatry Association. And the more we talked, the more we understood that we had more in common than we had differences.
And then the insurance companies needed to be educated.
More psychologists were beginning to enter private practice. But we were running into problems, and that insurance companies would not recognize us. They would not reimburse psychologists. And that was a formidable issue.
Another issue which was then handled.
The state health plan listened to our presentation, thanked us for coming, and we heard nothing until the following week. In the following week, they totally agreed that mental health had to be a core component of any treatment delivery in North Carolina. And not only that, but that psychologists were to be recognized,
leading to a cascade of other changes. NCPA intervened in a legal case where a neuropsychologist, Dr. Tony Puente, was not allowed to testify in a head injury case because he was not a physician. NCPA leaders took it all the way to Supreme Court. Laws were changed to allow such appropriate testimony and further increase legitimacy for psychologists. And NCPA became involved in a number of other local issues as well, such as testing in the schools, jury duty, public service, fighting to maintain hospital contracts and hospital privileges. Lots of work being done by growing committees. CE conferences continued. By the mid-1980s, enough money had been donated to buy a copier, a telephone system, and then later NCPA's first computer and printer. In 1988, the 40th anniversary was celebrated. Many of the still living past presidents of the time gathered here for a photo.
There were several highlights to that year, but the one that was so meaningful to me was the opportunity I had to talk about the 40 presidents, all of the presidents who had served before I did.
The 80s was also a time when award programs were established, such as the giving of the Mary Clark Award, the first one going to Mary Clark, of course. By the end of the decade, NCPA projects were in full swing. In 1989, Carol Kulwicki was hired and stayed on with NCPA until just this year, almost 30 years. The 1990s brought new challenges and achievements. A significant event at that time for NCPA was the founding of the North Carolina Psychological Foundation in 1991. Thanks to many people giving time and money, the new building and the new foundation became a reality. NCPA got to work right away serving psychologists and the public. As the 1990s continued, NCPA became even more actively involved in advocacy, often leading the way by gathering together organizations for the state's citizens and for the professions.
We pulled together because together we were more a united force in dealing with the lack of access patients in North Carolina were facing in terms of achieving good mental and physical health.
NCPA and DIP aim to help psychologists stay ahead of the curve. Legislative action took place at the state and federal levels and remains a cornerstone of NCPA's work. There were ongoing accomplishments. Mental health parity work began during the 1990s. NCPA was involved in raising funds, developing position statements, and recruiting bill sponsors among legislators. NCPA also led a successful campaign proposing elimination of utilization review prior to the 26th outpatient visit and freedom of choice among eligible providers. And other victories were achieved.
We were able to become Medicaid providers, and I know it's through Sally's efforts and others that we were able to get that to happen in North Carolina.
New committees were formed, like disaster response and diversity, and task forces developed as needed as well. Other committees had important accomplishments, such as the new referral service under public relations and the Public Sector Committee.
When the Public Sector Committee was first established, I think that was probably 1995 or so, the first thing we did was get a raise for every psychologist that worked for the state of North Carolina.
And new traditions, like the undergrad conference through the SASA Committee, were initiated then. CE continued into full swing in the 1990s, from the coast to the mountains, with a wide range of topics that were well attended for the strong content and for the socializing fun. And there were memorable speakers.
It was in 1991 that the Continuing Education Committee decided to invite Dr. Marcia Linehan here to teach a little-known psychotherapy. And that was 2 years before the textbook was published. And in 1993, the very first ever national intensive training took place in Durham.
Our strengths remained in our active, generous volunteer members. A new award category was started in the 1990s, NCPA President's Award, with Sally Cameron receiving the first one, and many others since then. Aside from the stellar newsletter, Newsgram, and Dip Directory, the 90s was a very prolific time for NCPA. Volunteers developed a number of specialized guides and manuals for psychologists. NCPA also went into merchandising briefly. But more importantly, NCPA continued with critical goals, like the pursuit of more funding for the public mental health system, protection of clients' confidentiality, and prohibition of the death penalty for the mentally disabled. The 50th anniversary was celebrated in 1998 with many past presidents attending, festivities, and cake. We then moved into the 21st century. Internet usage and email went from being relatively rare to now a normal part of American lives. This changed the way that NCPA operated. NCPA has kept up with the times, from fine-tuning our website, to using Zoom for meetings, to committees even having made YouTube videos about self-care for psychologists, and even our popular bi-weekly e-news.
Things we're really working on is upping our game in social media, because I think our membership committee talks about that's where we need to be. I'm not sure you consider this social media, but I think in all my years with NCPA, the thing that I've gotten the most comments on in terms of communication is e-news. People seem to like it, the members like it, it's a way to package the news.
But we've also kept up with the tried and true method of member communication, the newsletter, with engaging, timely, scholarly articles in the now quarterly publication. Throughout the 2000s and into our current decade, committees, task force, coalitions remain active and influential, like when the Disaster Response Network, which, after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, and Hurricane Katrina in 2005, rose to a new level of organization, training, and responding. NCPA supported the passage of the rule in 2002 that CE hours are required for licensure renewal, and remains committed to education to keep up with the latest information for the betterment of our psychologists and the public. There have been many triumphs, like the North Carolina Mental Health Parity Bill being passed in 2007, and then being involved in thwarting large increases in the behavioral health copays. NCPA continues to work on assuring roles in and advocating for psychologists within the Medicare and Medicaid systems, and more recently involved in assured extensions for psychologists for the deadline to connect to the HIE, and now working on updating the records retention law, psych pact legislation, occupational licensing challenges, and much, much more. NCPA also, in recent years, took opposition to HB2, the bathroom bill. NCPA challenged DOMA, a statute banning same-sex marriage, and protected the right of practitioners to ask about firearms with their clients. NCPA advocates for psychology now, while also supporting the growth of psychology for the future, from assuring viability of doctoral internship programs to our long-standing tradition of including student research at our conferences through SASA. There continues to be money to manage and money to raise. 2 new award categories were developed in the recent decades. The NCPF's President Award started in 2002, and then the Sally Cameron Award started in 2006. We continue to give out awards, and our star-studded people get awards. So many things about which to be proud.
Being part of passage of the mental health parity legislation and the autism insurance legislation have been highlights of my career.
One of the things I'm most proud of is our continuing education. We have been a beacon to other professions.
I look back and think, what is the most significant thing that we've accomplished over this period of time? And at least one of them is our relationship, which has been steady and positive and constructive with the state health plan. And because of that influence, the mental health benefit within the plan is really a model for the entire country now.
It has defended our rights, fought for our privileges, and served as a professional home for many of us.
I'm proud of our legal bar that's been raised so high and effectively and skillfully by people like Erica Wise, Elliot Silverstein.
NCPA was really action focused. If somebody had an idea and wanted to act upon that idea, all they had to do is step forward and put in the energy and find like minds, and it could be done.
I am proud of how NCPA meets its mission to enhance the field of psychology and serve those for whom psychologists provide services.
We also took the high road when other professions wanted to get licensed. Other professions have pushed against that. We never did. We collaborated. Sally got the executive directors of those associations to meet with us. They came over to NCPA. We didn't push against it. We helped them, supported them. I'm so proud that we took that high road.
So how does NCPA do all this work? Through the generosity of volunteers and contributions from members of the association.
We have 3 boards and 17 active committees supporting psychology and psychologists, supporting the public, supporting the future. With 8 regional reps on any given year, including some of the current reps. NCPA supports the public and psychology not only through our own committees, but also by being represented at various coalitions and committees throughout the state.
I said many times, we need to be sitting not at one table, we need to be sitting at all the relevant tables where the decisions are made about who is able to render behavioral health care.
We've had 70 presidents of NCPA, including Susan McCannon, our current 70th president, who will be passing along the reins later this year to 71st president, Tanya Armstrong. Many great volunteer leaders, past and present. Some pictured, many not. We currently have about 170 volunteers in total working to support our organization, which represents close to 20% of our membership. There is little member turnover from year to year. We estimate that committee members donate hundreds and sometimes even thousands of hours per year, keeping NCPA running smoothly. Thank you to the many, many volunteers who have given so generously of their time and talent over the years to NCPA. We continue to be lucky to have an excellent staff with outstanding longevity. They work so hard to keep up with an amazing number of projects running smoothly. Today, in 2018, NCPA is in its 70th year. We have grown to be an active, robust, vibrant organization and a vital force for psychology. It is our members who are the heart of our organization. From our longest involved members, such as Reuben Silver, who passed away in early April of 2018, to some of our youngest members.
I'm one of the youngest members of NCPA, but we are the future of the organization and the profession.
I've been involved in NCPA as a graduate student member since around the start of grad school, and I've found a number of parts of my involvement to be really valuable.
As a graduate student representative, I had the unique opportunity of helping to plan the first graduate student conference and learning more about what their careers and professions look like and how I might be able to play a role in that as I graduate in a couple years from our program.
We have psychologists from a wide variety of work settings, representing those in academics and in private practice, as well as a variety of other settings.
My work focuses on identifying and treating the psychologic aspects of cardiovascular disease.
I am a licensed psychologist at North Carolina A&T State University. I work there as the executive director of their counseling services.
Spent most of my 30 years as a psychologist locked behind bars in the prison. I've provided psychological services and supervision to people, women in the Department of Correction.
And the thing I like the most about being a psychologist with transplant is helping patients maximize their quality of life before and after transplant. And I also really like working with students, with interns and master's students.
And I think what I like most about being a psychologist is working on a multidisciplinary team in a medical setting and also supporting students as they go through their training.
I work in Raleigh in private practice. I'm also a yoga teacher and really enjoy bringing psychology into my yoga classes and workshops.
The future of psychology is unfolding, with many trends to watch predicted by APA. We don't know what the future holds, but we do know that the future of the profession depends on new members in decades to come. So when colleagues ask you, why belong to NCPA? Members matter.
NCPA keeps me informed about what's coming at both the local, state, and national level. Who else looks at every bill introduced in the North Carolina legislature to see their implications for psychology? Who else makes sure that psychology is at the table and not forgotten when there are important discussions and decisions to be made? Where would I be without you?
I really appreciate the attention to legislative action that I have seen in NCPA. I appreciate the great newsletter articles that we have on a regular basis, and I appreciate the many workshops that are relevant to a lot of different varieties and types of settings.
NCPA has helped me feel connected to the community of psychologists here in terms of trainings and opportunities.
We can't do this alone. Much like public television, the North Carolina Psychological Association is not state funded. We need you and we need your help. Please consider becoming a member. Please consider talking to your colleagues about becoming a member.
All of us have colleagues who are not members. Harass them. Get them to become members. We need everybody.
NCPA is supported through membership as well as donations of all types.
A perfect gift for NCPA is a contribution through the Friends of the Foundation to continue this wonderful work of our organization, protecting both psychologists and the public.
And be inspired by others making incredible donations.
To show my appreciation for NCPA, I established a travel award for graduate students in psychology programs throughout North Carolina. On the occasion of our 70th anniversary, and in honor of Sally Cameron, I am increasing my funding to this travel award so that it will be available for many more years.
So here's to NCPA, and here's to 70 years of service, and many more to come.
Happy anniversary, NCPA!
Happy birthday, NCPA.
Thank you, NCPA, and may we continue to learn and to grow.
It's been a great ride, and I appreciate everything that you have done for us.
Thank you, NCPA, for all the support you've given me through the years, and happy birthday.
Happy anniversary, NCPA. It's been a wonderful 10 plus years or whatever I've been here.
Hey NCPA, happy 70th anniversary. I just want to thank you so much for everything you've done for the field of psychology.
NCPA has been totally central to my life in terms of my dear, dear friends and colleagues, as well as many professional opportunities. Here's hoping for another 70 years.
It's an amazing organization with a long history of service, and we're looking forward to many years to come.
I've loved my experience with NCPA, and I'm really looking forward to being involved with the organization for many years to come.
I am excited to continue working with NCPA, and I look forward to whatever is down the road for them.
So happy birthday, NCPA. I miss you and I love you. Bye-bye.